So yeah, so there you go. It looks pretty good. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to start off by making a hole here in the ground. Now I already did this last year, so I'm just gonna end up using the same hole. Well, I should say luckily the same hole is still here. I just gotta clean it out a little bit, and I'm gonna use that by using this long auger bit that I got from Harbor Freight, and that'll allow me to get a deep hole while keeping it thin, because I don't want a big round hole, because otherwise the Scarecrow is going to be flopping around back and forth too much. It's going to keep it a lot more stable. All right, so now here's the sword I'm going to be putting down. As you can see, I have these metal stakes here, 2 of them. They're bolted into the sword. The sword is made out of wood, and I did put a backing rod here. It's a small angle iron that goes up through the length of the sword for reinforcement. Otherwise, the sword would snap. And then after that, I just put aluminum tape. I wrapped it in aluminum tape to give it that steel look. The handguard here is made out of wood. The handle is made out of 2 sections of galvanized pipe with a galvanized cap at the end for the, what's that called? The pommel. And then I have a 9-degree elbow in here, and this is where the hand attaches. After that, I just wrapped it around in electrical tape because it gave it a nice leathery kind of wrap look to it. So made it look a little bit more authentic. So I insert this into the hole that I just dug out. That looks like it's deep enough right there. That's not what she said. Let's go ahead and start assembling the Scarecrow. All right, so this right here is the forearm. This is also galvanized steel. Now the reason I went with galvanized is because galvanized steel doesn't corrode like regular steel or iron, so it can actually withstand the elements. And then the reason I did the forearm like this is because there's a lot of force that gets put onto this joint right here. So if I were to make it out of regular plastic PVC pipe, the PVC pipe would eventually snap. So I needed something that was strong enough, rigid enough to be able to handle all that weight. So this is essentially the elbow, which is kind of funny because the coupling is an elbow joint. So I want this pointed up. All right, so right around there. All right, so now this part goes up next. This is where the bicep, tricep is. So the forearm, or not the forearm, but the upper part of the arm. And then this 45-degree joint right here, this is what would be the shoulder. Put this in place, line up the holes, put the bolt through, bolts through. Now, washer plus a split washer, and then the nut to secure everything in place. And you want to use a split washer on this because this thing will shake a lot in the time that it's out here, especially on windy days. So the lock washers will help keep the bolt nice and secure from all those vibrations, so that the nuts don't come loose. Now this part's going to go across here. This is essentially the collarbone from shoulder. This is what's going to connect this right shoulder to the left shoulder. So I'm just going to repeat the process. Yep. All right, that's good right there. Now for the second arm, he has his arm up, so essentially like this right here. So this is the bicep, tricep, elbow. All right, and then I also bought this little solar light. Now this is one of the ones that go in the ground, and it had like a little canister around it, but I took it off and I got rid of it, and so I just used just the solar light in and of itself, so that way once the sun goes down, the pumpkin lights up on its own. See how well you can see that. So when it goes in, then I cut out a little hole here on the top back of the pumpkin, so that way you never really see it. And then it's a snug little fit right in there. There you go. So now the jack-o'-lantern will light up at nighttime. And the way I attached the pumpkin to the hand here is, if you can see, there's a little bolt on the inside of there with an aluminum strap that connects and is attached to the PVC pipe. So that and a zip tie that goes around the fingers. Since the zip tie is black, you don't really notice it. So those are the two things that keep the jack-o'-lantern attached to the hand. All right, so we got everything in place, but once I put the cloth on, it's gonna weigh down everything a lot. And I do want it to kind of have, I don't want the person to be flat like this. I do kind of want a little bit of a forwarding pivot, or a little bit of a forward lunge, I should say. So something I didn't have last year was chest piece, and it looked really flat. So what I did was I just kind of bunched up a whole bunch of wire, kind of made a rib cage thing, and then I'm going to put this piece of foam, just kind of help secure it in place, and so that way none of the fabric gets caught on the wire. But the issue is I have to loop this on, so I'm going to have to take the arm off, the top arm, and then loop this through. Decent enough right there. And again, so what this does is that this gives the torso a little bit of thickness, a little bit more volume, so that way it doesn't look so flat, because that's what I ended up having last year. So by adding a little bit more dimension to the torso, it gives the impression that there's actually a rib cage inside of the Scarecrow, and it makes it look a lot more realistic. Kind of nifty little thing there. All right, so this right here, I just ended up putting some twisties in there, and they're black, so you can't really notice it. And if you do, it kind of just looks like string that was used, or just kind of looks like string that's part of the bracer there. That now opens up, and then put it over steel pipe. Put the handle inside of the hand. So the handle helps cover up the 90-degree elbow joint there. I just put this on. All right, that looks pretty good. If I snug it. Oh! And that just snapped. All right. So what ended up happening is that not only did it break off from right here where the bolt was holding it in place, but there's a fracture that goes up through the elbow here up to the next bolt. Now the top part's still secure, so what I ended up doing is I ended up putting 3 screws, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom, and those screws go into the this part right here that connects into the metal pipe. And then just for a little bit extra security, I don't know how much this helps, but I also put a zip tie right here to kind of hold the fracture in place, and see if it works. But otherwise, if it doesn't, then I'm gonna figure something else out, which is kind of strange because last year this thing held up fine, and this point was not an area of concern. So I don't know. We'll see how it holds up. Okay. I almost had it. All right, so I'm back and I ended up changing the elbow here for a galvanized piece of metal here. So now this should no longer be a weak point. From here, we'll see if this ends up being a weak point. Hopefully not. But then if it does, then I'm just gonna have to replace this part too, which will be annoying. But I'm hoping this should be it, but only time, well, I should say a couple more attempts will determine that. All right, so there it is, all nice and complete. Again, a couple of things though that I want to address is that the first hole right there, that one didn't work. It made it too slanted and the whole thing looked extremely awkward. So I ended up finding the second hole, the actual hole from last year, so which is a little bit more vertical, and as you can see, it still has a little bit of tilt, which is good. Like I said, the first one just had too much tilt into it. It was sloped way too much, so that ended up fixing a lot of the issues there. Now, when I originally made this, I did want the back shoulder to be a little bit higher, so that way it kind of looks like he's throwing the pumpkin at you, you know. A couple of other things is that I did hit the fabric here with some white spray paint, more so on the bottom, just to kind of give it that faded look. I had already done that last year, but it needed a little bit of a touch up. So again, you can see a lot of the whites right there, gives it that more distressed look. And then if you look up at the chest area, it's not super flat. It does have a little bit of thickness to it, not too much, because you know, I still want to have it to have a little bit of a skeletal appearance, and I don't want to make it look like he has a bodybuilder chest or anything like that. And then the head is positioned good and well. As you can see, it's looking straight down at us, which again is what I like for the positioning there. And then one last thing that I did is that this joint right here has a tendency to rotate forward. So what I did to prevent that, so that way it can stay at a little bit of an angle, is that around the elbow, and I covered it up, but that top elbow there, what I did was I threw a string up there. You can see the string right here comes down, and then yeah, the neighbor put that there, but it ties around the fence, so that way it stays at the angle that I want and it doesn't tilt forward too much. So yeah, so there you go. It looks pretty good. You know, and as I use this over the years, it'll only look more and more distressed. I like it. It's floating. And then I'm going to take some shots of it at nighttime once the little solar light in the pumpkin turns on. But this is how it looks during the daytime. And then here's how the sword looks. Now up close, of course, you can see the little screws there, but from far away, it's not very noticeable. You know, it does have that shiny metal look in the sword here. And then you can see how, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is just electrical tape that I would pinch and wrap, which gave it a nice textured look. It looks like leather. And then these are bolts that I put here because I just kind of liked the way that they looked. Covered up the elbow joint there so that way you can't see it. All right, so I'm on day 3 of this guy being up here, and so far no issues. Everything seems pretty good. It is a little dark, but I wanted to show you guys kind of what it looks like at nighttime, so you guys can see how the little lantern turns on there. There's no wind right now, but that's how it looks at nighttime. It hasn't shifted at all, it hasn't moved. It's stayed pretty solid this entire time, so pretty happy with the positioning of it so far. And again, there have been no issues with it sagging or tilting or anything like that. I ended up putting a fan right there underneath just to kind of give you guys an idea of what it looks like with a little bit of wind blowing, so that way you guys can kind of see it a little bit better there. So overall, I think that looks pretty cool. Alright, so there you guys go. There's the floating scarecrow that I made. Hopefully you guys found it to be kind of cool, found it interesting. And this has been Household Journeys. Take care, people.